in the sense that you either hate them or don't. And so it's kind of there's no nuance. It's too black and white for us to make a distinction in.
Right.
But nonetheless, it does. Actually, I would suggest no, because she was adapted to the male hierarchical structure, and the feminine sock order here, the self-organizing collective, will be a different form. It won't be this mass movement as we understand politics today.
Okay. We had another question from a viewer. It says, what are some of the more bizarre linguistics or linguistic patterns that you've come across here recently?
Well, we get some really strange ones. We had, for instance, in a previous report, I think in issue number 1, we had this thing about cousin Alexei. There's linguistics describing at a detail level some kind of upset, social upset relative to weather conditions and maybe even warfare or something going on. It may relate to even the central U.S. or the central European area or Central Asia. It's in that latitude area, but we don't know for sure what part of the planet. And within that, it suggests that there will be video crews out there doing what video crews do, which is to, photograph everything and present reports. And they'll happen to stop and interview this fellow, and then he goes on his way. And then later on, when they look at that video, they'll be astounded because it'll show that he's not human as we understand it, that he looked human more or less, perhaps at the extreme edge of some level of what we might consider to be human here on the planet. But the video somehow will capture elements that suggest that this fellow is a humanoid cousin of ours who just happens to be here. And then it'll send off a big scramble as everybody tries to hunt him, and they won't find him again. So that was an interesting bit of stuff. Another really curious thing that we've gotten recently, we've called brain creases. And it comes from the German word for crop circle. Germans call the crop circles corn creases because the corn or the crop is creased. It's not broken or bent. It's just sort of folded over. And what we're saying is that maybe, just maybe, the next order of crop circle will be imprinted directly into human brains, and that people will just be impacted, maybe tens of thousands or so. And the data seems to suggest that it's ongoing now, this process of corn creasing or brain creasing on humans. And we don't know what the purpose is. We can speculate about that, but one of the interesting effects is going to be felt this coming year when we still have the mainstream media. They'll try and divert us from some of the more horrific news of the day by reporting on these human interest stories of all of these people that seem to have a, quote, same dream at the same time at this particular point. And it won't really be a dream, but it'll be some kind of a shared common mental experience, if you will. It may be that we're all sitting around and all of a sudden the guys who are doing the corn circles or crop circles there in England or wherever are going to just suddenly decide, oh, geez, all these years we've been aiming our message at the crop, and the crop isn't doing a thing with it. They're just ignoring us totally. Why don't we aim our message at all those humans running around on the planet and see what they do with our message? And then they may beam that right into our consciousness. But it's going to create an interesting juxtaposition because the people that, according to our data, that experience it won't be alarmed by it and might even feel slightly euphoric from the process. But those that don't experience it might indeed be very alarmed and are going to wonder what's going on. And so we get some really strange stuff sometimes.
Interesting. Hey, we need to go to a brief commercial break, and then we'll come back with Clif High on CPNLive.com.
This, our country and all its people, could be in danger of nuclear attack. In minutes by enemy missiles. In hours by enemy aircraft.
We live in a world where we can never be too prepared. Natural disaster, the threat of terrorist attack, biological, chemical, nuclear, radiological hazards, all a reality in the world we live in. What steps have you taken to ensure that you and your family will be prepared in the event of unexpected tragedy? We we urge you to please know that there is a way out. There is a way to secure the well-being of you and yours. There is hope. However dark the darkest hour, Alpine Air Foods has provided you with a solution. Alpine Air Foods has been producing quality, freeze-dried, dehydrated, instant meals for over 21 years. These foods are all natural, retaining over 98% of the nutritional content and have an extendable shelf life of up to 15 years. What better way to arm you and your family in the event of a disaster, eh? Well, we've always said it's better to be safe than to be sorry. Shouldn't you? Order today and receive your first shipment of delicious Alpine Air meals in a matter of days. Because it's never too soon to begin considering alternative solutions. To begin taking the safety of you and your family into your own hands. Please, call today.
Hi, we're back again live here. I'm Tom Brush. We've got our guest Clif High. This is CPNLive.com. Clif, one thing I wanted to touch on, and this is right up front in your report, it's called the disclaimer of the extremes. Could you explain what that means?
When I first started doing this work, I knew I needed to have the ability to tag emotional components to words, so I set out and built a numeric scale. And as one might suspect, if you're given a lexicon of several 100,000 words, it's easier to identify words that go towards extreme emotions and be able to quantify that. In other words, it's easier to say, oh yeah, fear is certainly a negative 10, and joy is a positive 10, or bliss is a positive 10. But it becomes more difficult when you get down into shaded emotions. Frightened, is frightened a 4, or is it a 6, or whatever, or -4 or -6, depending on how you want to think of the scale. And so, because it was easier to assign emotional quantifiers to extreme emotions, we have a tendency to concentrate, so to speak, as an artifact of our processing on those extremes and draw in more of those. So basically, you can look at our reports as being a worst-case kind of scenario, that if you can see it described in our reports, it probably won't happen 100% that way, but some of the language we've described to some degree will actually show up in describing the events that will come out of it. And hopefully what we've done is capture the far end of the extreme that won't really materialize. It'll just be somewhere between where we are now and that far end of the extreme range.
So based on that, and that makes common sense, and I think it's important for the listeners and the viewers to understand that, and hopefully they'll order your report and read it. How do you, let's say you're just the average person, you're hearing this now for the first time, what would you suggest a person do to prepare for what you see coming here shortly?
Well, two different levels of preparation are required. For the immediate, few years, you need to concentrate on skills that allow you to be as self-sufficient as possible, because everybody out there is going to have to rely on themselves first. And you're also going to need to spread those skills around if you can, because everybody's going to need a lot of help. And it's common sense. Can food if you've got excess food around. Figure out how to dry it to save it if you've got that ability. Whatever we can use in the way of resources, figure out a way to put them to use or store them for future use, because we're in a world of hurt, especially relative to the food supply. We've had 8 years now of a decreasing grain production globally.